Welcome. We're looking forward to a great hour with you. Whether you're nearby here in Maine, whether you might be in another part of the world, I hope you're having a great Wednesday, or if you're already on your Thursday, happy Thursday to you. Just to notify you, there is the capability for closed captioning. So should you make use of that, feel free to do so. You can click a button and enable closed captioning. Over the next hour, we're looking forward to hearing from you and answering your questions. On that note, there is a Q&A functionality. You can ask your questions in the Q&A. We'll try to get to as many questions as we possibly can this evening. If we can't get to your question, do not fear. You can always reach out to the admissions office, and we're happy to help whenever we can. Also, just to note, you are not on camera or audio as a participant in this webinar this evening. So you'll be joined by me and my fantastic colleague here with me, Melissa Quinby. My name is Emily Almas. I'm the Assistant Vice President and Director of Admissions. Melissa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Melissa Quinby, Senior Associate Dean of Students and Director of First Year Experience.
And we know that it's a busy time if you have a student who is a senior in high school applying to college. So thanks again for joining us for what should be a great conversation about student life at Bowdoin. We're going to start, just to situate you, we're going to start talking briefly about Bowdoin. Maybe you know a lot about us. Maybe you have very limited information or knowledge already. Wherever you or your student may be on the Bowdoin knowledge range, we're glad you're here, and we're happy to tell you more about Bowdoin College. Then we'll transition to talking a bit more focused on student life. What do you need to know? What does your student need to know about life on campus? And we're looking forward to dedicating some time at the end of our session to talking about your questions, the things that are top of mind for you. So to get us started, Bowdoin College is a liberal arts college. And for us, this means a few different things, but some points I want to make about what I think makes us very special. As a liberal arts college, we're really thinking about the whole student, and that student's going to have an experience, if not actual opportunity, to get to know their peers very well, to understand the breadth of the ways that academic areas of study intersect with the world, to interact very deeply with faculty in the classroom and outside of it, in things like research, as well as mentorship and advising opportunities. There are going to be lots of small classes. Your student's going to take classes in lots of different things. We actually require that. And they're going to have a breadth of opportunities to get to know their classmates outside the classroom. They're going to live in residence halls, eat in dining halls, be involved in student life and leadership opportunities. All of this leaves them quite prepared for the world after college. And many of our students go on to graduate and professional school, not to mention a whole range and host of different professional outcomes. As I mentioned, Bowdoin, I think I mentioned, is in Maine. We're in Brunswick, Maine, in coastal Maine, the mid-coast. I'll show you a map in just a minute if you're less familiar with where we're located. And at any point in time, we have about 1,850 students on campus. So if you're less familiar with where Brunswick, Maine might be, or maybe even Maine, the state is in red. Brunswick is the blue dot there. And Bowdoin students come from all over the country, here in Maine, but mostly actually from outside of it. They come from many different places with many different ideas and perspectives, backgrounds, experiences, hopes and dreams. And that's really important to us, that we have this cohort of about 500 or so first-year students each year with lots of different experiences and perspectives on our campus. That breadth and diversity is something that's essential to who we are in our community. Bowdoin students also come from many different parts of the world, and I know many of you are joining us from different parts of the world this evening as well. I mentioned that we're in Brunswick, and one of the really lovely things about Bowdoin, in essential things, I think, is our location and the access to the outdoors, to nature. Here, some students are doing research with a faculty member in the Atlantic Ocean, which is just a few miles from campus. But whether it's the coastline and our study of the environment, or the natural world that students make use of in other ways for recreation, or other kinds of research, there are lots of ways that our students are engaging in the world outside of them. Speaking of Brunswick, just a few blocks from campus, you'll find this scene. This is downtown Brunswick, Maine. Population of about 20,000 people. That very tall building in the background there, that's actually one of our residence halls. And downtown Brunswick is a tourist town. It is home to restaurants and shops, bookstores, grocery store, a pharmacy. There are a lot of different resources and opportunities available to students just by foot or walking, or excuse me, or biking or rollerblading or however they want to get around. Very easy to get off campus in Brunswick. Some of those big box stores, chains, those are just a short drive away. And then, of course, the city of Portland is about half an hour south of us. That's also where you'll find things like the Portland Airport. Just about a block off campus is the Amtrak station that students can take easily to places like Boston. So lots of different ways to get around. And one of the really special things I think about Bowdoin is our location. Students can and do study many different things. There are over 40 different areas of study. Whether a student comes to Bowdoin undecided or interested in many different things, or is really deeply, firmly set on a particular discipline that they're excited about, there's many different pathways. We do have general distribution requirements we ask students to take, and then they'll declare a major in the spring of their second year. No matter what they major in or major minor in or do an interdisciplinary major in, there's lots of different ways to pursue a degree here at Bowdoin. They'll have exposure and opportunity to take many different kinds of courses, and that's something that's really important to us. Before we switch to talking about student life in a more focused way, I did just want to take a minute to leave you with this comment or quote from our first president, Joseph McKean. In speaking about places like Bowdoin or literary institutions, what were called at the time, he referenced that we exist for the common good. So our students, our faculty, our alumni, our staff, I think we think about this a lot, and we'll talk about the common good throughout the remainder of the presentation in different ways, whether it is the ways that our students engage in the local community, the research they're doing, or really just the culture on campus. Bowdoin students are smart, they're kind, they embrace gratitude, and they also, and this goes on when they're alumni as well, think about how to have a positive impact on the world. So I wanted to make sure to address and touch upon the common good. All right, we're going to turn our attention a bit to orientation. And I thought we would start here, Melissa, because as a student, this is really the beginning of your Bowdoin journey. I imagining your student is joining us at Bowdoin next year. Over the summer, there are some important things they'll need to do. We're not going to talk about that in this session, but if you find yourself in this situation, pay attention for that next summer. But then they arrive on campus in August for orientation. And could you tell us just a little bit, Melissa, about what purpose orientation serves and how students experience it?
Emily, I'd love to. It's a great question. So we have a multi-day orientation program at Bowdoin. Our first student arrivals are typically our F1 visa holders, international students who come in for about 3 days before the rest of the class arrives. They have an opportunity to adjust to any travel changes that they're going through, time adjustments. It's an opportunity to do a little bit of shopping. And there's lots of programming to help students adjust to the Brunswick community and the Bowdoin campus. And those students have time to spend with the dean that they'll be working with and lots of the resources on campus. And then typically the rest of the class arrives a few days later. We have a really spectacular arrival day. The whole campus shows up to get the incoming class, all new students settled. And in a typical year, our students then depart on these orientation trips the day after arrival day. And these are great photos. We have a huge range of orientation trips. I think last year we offered about 36 options for students. So we have hiking trips and we have surfing trips and paddling trips. We also have trips where students participate in common good projects. So in the local community, working at a food shelter, for example. So we really offer a spectrum of trips that we want to make sure that every student finds a trip that feels like a comfortable beginning point for them to come into the campus community. And then I saw a question earlier, and I'll just say, you don't have to be outdoorsy to come to Bowdoin. So think about us. We're really, we hope you fall in love with the outdoors while you're at Bowdoin, but you don't have to be outdoorsy to come to Bowdoin. And then we have these trips and students return to campus, and then we do 4 days of on-campus programming, where we help students adjust to our community, our culture, our practices, our policies, and we make sure that students get introduced to a huge breadth and depth of resources. So as classes begin, students know where to turn to get assistance. As the first year dean, I am a primary point person for all incoming students and will direct students out to resources along the way. So that's just a little bit of an overview.
And one of the things I love about orientation trips, besides the fun that our students have, is that it's not an optional add-on that only some students do or get to participate in. It is a unifying experience across the entire class of 500 or so students. And I think that's really special. And I think that reflects a lot of the values you see at Bowdoin, is this notion of community and inclusivity being something that's center stage. All right, so students are back from their orientation trips. They've moved into their residence halls and classes are about to begin. Of course, we have to spend some time talking about where students live. This is a big part of the college experience, and certainly it's a big part of the Bowdoin experience. At Bowdoin, all first-year students live in first-year residence halls that we affectionately call the bricks because they're made out of brick. After the first year, students have a variety of choices through the college housing lottery of where to live and whom to live with. Two things I would add at Bowdoin: you don't get to pick your roommate as a first year student. We think that's important. You'll have an experience, your student will have an experience with a roommate or roommates. Most students come to Bowdoin not necessarily knowing any other person there. So that's a really great way, I think, we build community from the start. And as an upper level student, your student has a choice of sort of who to live with, where to live on campus. There's a lottery, as I mentioned. One popular option, particularly for our sophomore students, are our college houses. Melissa, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about college houses and then residential life as an upper class student, or anything else you would add.
Sure. So our first year students live in 8 first year residence halls that we've referred to as the bricks, as Emily said, and those are quite centrally located on campus. So our students are really in the center part of campus. And then the sophomore year, about half of the sophomore class lives in these college houses, which are essentially small communities that operate as the living room of campus. Students apply to live in these houses. They present a program opportunity that they would like to deliver it as a resident of the house. The students who live in the house work together to put all kinds of programming and events on. That might be social programming, it might be academic programming, it might be hosting a speaker who's come to campus for an after speaking engagement. So our college houses really are a vibrant place to live. And then if students elect to not live or choose not to apply to live in a college house, we have lots of other housing for our sophomore students. So I saw a question earlier. Pretty much most of our students remain in our housing through the entire duration of their time at Bowdoin.
Great. I think our residential spaces are a place where you can visually see that community that is such an integral part of the Bowdoin experience. But I think another place on campus you can see it quite well is in our dining halls. So we have 2 main dining halls, Molten Union and Thorn. This is a picture from Thorn Dining Hall. And they are all you care to eat, swipe in buffet style dining halls just to situate you. But the scene on the screen is not an unusual one. It's a place where students come together, they chat, they catch up, they learn something new. Faculty, staff, others will go and frequently eat there as well, because the food is really great. I'm sure you've heard that from many colleges and universities, but I have to tell you, it is absolutely true. Perhaps you had a meal on our campus and you know that yourself. There are some other options as well. So there's a cafe, there's a grill, a convenience store, and then of course, opportunities for students off campus should they make use of the local town. But most students are eating most of their meals on campus. Anything else you would add, Melissa, that you think is important to know about dining?
It's amazing. The dining at Bowdoin is amazing. And everything Emily said, it is a place for us to gather as a community, share food, talk. The dining halls are beautiful, and we really, really, really appreciate our dining staff. They do an amazing job taking care of us.
I have to tell you, as a totally unrelated aside, my first graduation I attended at Bowdoin. Something that was so moving to me was to see members of our dining hall staff voluntarily come on a day off to clap and cheer for the students they've got to know over their 4 years at Bowdoin as they graduated. And that is not an atypical anecdote. Our staff and our colleagues across campus and our students were all part of one really warm community. Speaking of that community, I do want to note some focus or spend some time focusing on advising and resources and support. And I know there are a lot of questions coming in on these themes as well. And so we'll start by talking about academic advising specifically, but then focus really on student life outside the classroom for some of our time. So faculty are there the entire time that your student is here with us. They are advisors throughout your student's experience. All first-year students have an advisor, a faculty advisor. All students have advisors once they've declared that major in the second year. And the faculty-student interaction doesn't just take place formally in advising relationships. It happens informally all across campus, not to mention in the classroom experience as well. We also have the Bowdoin Center for Learning and Teaching. They host a number of programs and opportunities, workshops, events for students to strengthen their skills, get tutoring, seek more academically focused resources. I went through part of the fun of putting tonight's presentation together was going through some of our upcoming events on campus. And I pulled just some recent examples of workshops, and they range from preparing for finals to managing your time with realistic schedules and sort of everything in between. And so thinking about how we connect students with the people who are there to support, encourage, and advise them is really important. Anything else you'd want to mention about academic advising?
Yeah, I think it's important to say that as a student is preparing to arrive to Bowdoin, Emily noted this earlier, but across the summer, students complete a lot of forms. And one of the primary sets of forms that an incoming new student completes is about their academic background, their academic interests, so that we can be really thoughtful about making a match to an advisor for that student to work with for the first portion of their time at Bowdoin, which is typically the first 3 semesters. So students tell us a little bit about their high school, they tell us a little bit about their experiences, and they also give us a sense of, if you're going to match me, these would be my sort of top 5 departments that I would be interested in getting involved with at Bowdoin. We don't promise that's going to be a perfect match, and yet we find that our student and faculty advising relationships are really strong at Bowdoin. And occasionally students do remain with their first advisor all the way through because they are in a department that they end up majoring in.
Mm-hmm. And of course, thinking beyond the classroom as well as in it, but beyond the classroom for the focus of tonight's session, there are so many different places, resources, offices, and most importantly, people at Bowdoin who are thinking about the student experience, supporting students, and connecting students to resources on campus. I do want to note, just because I imagine we'll get lots of great questions as we talk about the next few slides, that this is your students' experience, and part of being in college is learning to navigate college and grow and develop as a person. And so we have tons of resources available to students, but it is up to students to take great advantage of them. We'll talk a little bit about that further. I've listed some of these resources here. We'll talk about some of them, although we won't necessarily get to every resource today. And I do want to start. I have to embarrass Melissa for a second. I'm very sorry. I pulled this screenshot off of our website because I loved it, because I think it speaks to the kind of people and the way we think about the student experience at Bowdoin. This is from an advertisement that the Dean of Students office had for drop-in hours for the deans of students. Those are the lovely deans there. They're fantastic people. We have one with us tonight, actually. We're very lucky to have that. Since I won't talk for you, Melissa, can you tell us a little bit more, and anything I would have missed on the last slide, but also about the Dean of Students office, and what is your role and your colleagues' role in working with students and families?
It's a great question. I think the best way to describe it is, when I think about a new student entering Bowdoin, is that we are supporting students with their social and their academic transition to college. It's a big deal to go to college. It's a huge transition. Students are changing communities. They might be moving far away from home. They might be living with a roommate for the first time in their life. So we are an office that really recognizes all of these transitional pieces and validates, and we are aware of them. And so particularly with first year students, I do lots and lots of what I refer to as meet and greet meetings with students. It's my primary kind of contact point with students, is just reaching out and saying, hello, I'd love for you to come up and spend a half hour and just tell me a little bit about how things are going at Bowdoin. Most of the time, students share out how things are going in their room, how they're navigating their sleep patterns in college, how they're navigating the dining halls, are they making friends? which classes are feeling more compressed, where they're finding freedom and joy, and then really making sure that if there's a resource that we want to get them connected to, that I facilitate that connection point. So it's not unusual for me to connect a student to the Bowdoin Center for Learning and Teaching for a workshop on procrastination, or to connect a student across to a colleague in sexuality, women, and gender. So what I do is think of myself as the hub at the center of a wheel, and I know a lot about all the offices at Bowdoin, and I can move students across out to the resources that will really serve and deepen the satisfaction of their experience at the college.
And every student is assigned a dean, right?
Correct. So first year students, so there is a class dean for each class. So there's a first year class dean, a sophomore class dean, and so on. And then we have one class dean who works with our F1 visa holders. So those students remain with the dean throughout their time at Bowdoin because of all of the transition that they go through, the paperwork, the I-20s. So there's one dean who works closely with our F1 visa holders.
Great. Turning our attention a bit to the ways that we support and encourage health and wellness. There are a number of offices on campus that are engaged, and I really would say this is a community-wide conversation. I'm going to elevate some of the particular resources, but thinking about how to stay well and be well, I think, is a conversation that all of us across campus are engaged in as a community. Some of those offices include our student health services, the counseling services office, the program that works on student wellness. We also have spiritual life advisors that can be a resource or support, and then lots of different ways that students can engage in recreation. Melissa, what do you think students and families being here tonight need to know about any of these resources, or tips or tricks that you would suggest to them as their young person's heading off to college?
Yeah, these are great resources. So what I would say is all of these services are free to our students on campus. So they're included in the cost of attending Bowdoin. That all of our services are very accessible for students. We make it really clear early on that our students use these resources. We normalize these resources for students. We want our students to know that we want them to use these resources. One of the things I talk about frequently during orientation when I'm up in front of the class is that we consider asking for help a strength at Bowdoin. We want students to ask questions. We know there's a lot of vulnerability as a student transitions to a new community. So I think we have an incredible set of resources. I would name in this list that we want to name that some of our resources are considered confidential resources. So if a student goes and speaks with certain people, that's a confidential conversation. And I think that the more administrative people, faculty, and staff that a student is connected to, sort of the more satisfying the experience at the college is, because we really are about relationships and connectivity. And I think Emily used the word earlier. It's a community full of really kind people who want to care and support for each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So turning our attention now to our Center for Co-Curricular Opportunities, home of some fantastic people in the Office of Student Fellowships and Research, off-campus study. I was just actually talking to some of those colleagues earlier today, and our lovely health professions advising office or person. These are resources for students who are thinking about experiences such as study away, or working with a faculty member, whether it's at Bowdoin or somewhere else, to conduct research, for example, in the summer. Maybe someone who's thinking about a pathway towards a health profession like medical school, dental school, public health. Again, sort of in keeping with the theme that Melissa just mentioned, I think we're eager to provide opportunity to students, and particularly so that every student can access opportunities, no matter where they're coming from, whatever their background might be, and whatever sort of pre-knowledge they might have coming to the table. When it comes to things like study away, because I know we get many questions about opportunities like study away, one of the really nice things about Bowdoin is you can study away with any major. There's no restriction on your major. And there's over 100 different opportunities that have been pre-approved or arranged in terms of credit transfer process with the study away off-campus study office. They provide advising and support, About 60% of Bowdoin students are studying away in some capacity. Most are going for a semester, but you can also go for a year or pursue something like a summer opportunity. And I would also just mention that Bowdoin students are eager to take on the world. I think we see that not just in study away, but also in the opportunities our students take advantage of for research, but also fellowships. Lots of students from Bowdoin end up doing incredible work around the world as part of Fulbright fellowships and lots of other different kinds of opportunities. Melissa, what did I miss? There's so much to mention here, I know.
I I'm in awe of all the resources that come through just this set of 3 offices and the opportunities that are available to students. I have served on a committee for the Office of Student Fellowships and Research, reading potential candidates for the Watson Fellowship, which is an incredible fellowship opportunity. So what I would say is, these are resources that we introduce students to early on in their career at Bowdoin, and we just make sure that students know how to get to them. And then we're constantly advertising what's coming out of each of these offices. So for example, our sophomore class really started engaging with the off-campus study process in late September. They have the first introductory meeting. They learn about how to engage with the application process. They start to learn about programs. So we really get out in front of this with students so that they can then make great determination about what courses to take in the next semester to set themselves up for a potential opportunity. I think the folks who work in these offices are fabulous.
And I do just want to make a plug if you're curious about the really neat work that our students are engaged in. At the bottom here is the website of our funded summer opportunities webpage. It's bowdoin.edu/summer-opportunities. Feel free to take a peruse. I encourage it. There's some really incredible work that our students are doing in all different kinds of fields. And I just do want to highlight that research at Bowdoin is happening across the disciplines, certainly in STEM, but also in the humanities, the arts, and social sciences as well. So always a good mention as your student is thinking about things of interest and note. Of course, our Student Accessibility Office is also a resource I want to be sure to cover and mention. They have a fantastic FAQ page, so that's also a resource I would direct students and families to. But the mission of their work is to work with students to arrange for reasonable accommodations for students with documented disabilities, both formal and informal. And they have a fantastic office and staff. Leslie Levy, in that office is really an advocate and collaborator with students and others across campus. So definitely encourage you or your student to make use of their web resources as you're thinking about your college list. Melissa, anything you would want to mention on this slide?
Yeah, this is a great slide to have here. What I would say is this is a resource that we will be very clear about in the beginning of the summer onboarding process. If you elect to come to Bowdoin, what we do is really try to translate for students the difference between accessibility accommodations in high school as you enter the college landscape. It really, Leslie Levy is there to answer questions. She does a great program during orientation for students and their parents' guardians, just so that everybody has a sense of what her office is able to provide for students. She works in close contact with our counseling services in the event that a student elects to get neuropsych testing while they're at Bowdoin. So she really is working closely with students and also arranging. We have an amazing academic testing center on campus, so where students can sit exams, particularly if they have time and a half as one of their accommodations. Leslie's a great resource, and I often introduce students to her just to get a sense of what might be a possibility for them. And many students end up working for Leslie and sort of making sure that our entire student body is aware of universal design and how we think about accessibility as a campus.
Great suggestions. Turning our direction a bit to career exploration and development, another office with fantastic colleagues across campus. And they really offer students a range of different kinds of services that it includes individual advising or conversation to some really cool signature events. One of my favorites is the sophomore boot camp. There is no physical activity involved. I always just have to make that super clear. The name is a bit of a misnomer. But our sophomore students come back to campus a few days early in the spring semester. And just to situate you, the academic calendar at Bowdoin, fall term classes is sort of end of August to mid-December, and then spring term is end of January to May. So that's sort of a rough calendar for you. But our sophomore students come back a few days early, and they engage in this lovely professional development experience where they're working with alumni who have volunteered their time to talk about career experiences, where they're doing workshops on their own professional goals and aspirations, as well as things like cover letters and interview skills. Sophomore bootcamp to me is just a great example of how an experience at Bowdoin prepares students broadly for any number of careers and professional outcomes. And the fantastic team in the Career Exploration and Development Center, I think, also embrace that. Anything you would want to highlight from your experience working with students as it relates to career exploration and development?
Our career exploration and development team is fabulous, and they will really engage with the student kind of where they're at. We don't have any expectation that a student coming to Bowdoin knows what they want to do beyond Bowdoin. In fact, we encourage you to not know what you want to do. We want you to explore. It's really, really about exploring. We do have students who come in with a particular mindset, and that's very fine. And those students often do change and say, oh, I took a class in a discipline that I'd never heard of before, and I'm pivoting toward this thing that's been just amazing and eye-opening for me. This group I love the sophomore bootcamp, Emily, too, because it's an opportunity for the class to come back together again as a group in January for a few days. It's a lot of internship preparation, it's resume preparation, it's engagement with alums, and it's really a joyful experience, and students get a lot done during that time to prepare up for the summer of the sophomore year.
And I saw a question coming through in the Q&A, and don't worry, we will get to the Q&A at the end, I promise, but about sort of what students do outside the classroom and outside of all these other things that we've been talking about. Are there student clubs? And absolutely there are. We are an incredibly busy place. I will note, I don't think Bowdoin students, and Melissa, you can correct me if you feel differently, but I don't think Bowdoin students are busy for the sake of being busy. They are busy because they are joyful, and there's so many different things that they're excited about, and they want to spend their time in service of those interests or new things that they're learning, or their peers or others' experiences and interests as well, which is a really delight to see. There are over 100, I think it's 120 now, different student-run clubs and organizations. There's no way I could list them all for you on a slide. So instead, I provided this screenshot here of the different categories. You can go to our website and explore more. Click on any of those hyperlinks on our Student Life website, and you can get more information about all the different kinds of ways that our students come together. But Student Life is busy, and student activities definitely reflect that. Our Smith Union is home to those engaging in our student life, whether that is a speaker or event or a program happening on campus. We also have a craft center that's open to students, that students can take advantage of lots of really cool, I'm actually very jealous of this, art supplies and workshops and exciting things happening. And then we also have a community host program. Melissa, do you want to talk a little bit about the community host program?
Yeah, this is an opportunity for students who might be coming from quite far away to apply to have a host family in the kind of Brunswick, Bath, kind of mid-coast area. Typically, our host families are within about a 15-minute commute to campus. And I'm using that term family loosely. It's all kinds of makeup of different types of families who step up and offer to become a host for a student. So it's a really wonderful program. Our host families provide a lot of support for students. They sometimes host students. They sometimes provide transportation for students. They have the student over for a meal, a couple of meals a semester. So they can really become an anchor for a student during their time at Bowdoin.
Yeah. So lots happening on campus, and I just looked at a very few short days around this program this evening at things going on, and listed a few here just to give you a quick perspective peek into things happening on campus. And this is not even all encompassing of all the different student organizations and events that are going on right now. So you can see whether it's engagement in the arts, whether it's athletics, whether it's religious life, whether it is the haunted Bowdoin tour. I don't know how to categorize that one, but whatever, the cookie time, whatever it might be, Bowdoin students are doing lots of different things on campus. We're an incredibly busy place. And some folks are engaged in athletics as part of that as well. So Bowdoin is Division III in the NCAA. We are a member of the New England Small College Athletic Conference, or NESCAC. You might have heard of that abbreviation before. We have 31 varsity teams, men's and women's. I will just throw out a reminder, we don't offer athletic scholarships as a Division III college, so good and important to know that. But certainly students take advantage of athletics, whether it's about 1 in 4 of our students who are participants in varsity athletics on campus, or as a student going to cheer on their classmates and peers on the rugby pitch, as this is a picture of our women's rugby team, or in other locations as well. We also have recreational and intramural opportunities too. I'll make a shout out for the curling team. I know they are very proud of the club curling team on campus. There are a number of other club teams as well as intramural teams that students can participate on. Club teams compete against other colleges and universities, but aren't varsity level. So a good example would be rowing. They compete against other colleges. Intramurals are opportunities for groups of folks to come together, whether it's a residence hall or just a group of friends, to play each other. So 3-on-3 basketball is a good example of that. There are also informal recreational opportunities. So there's a long-standing soccer game that happens every week that folks get together, and it's totally informal. What am I missing, Melissa, about athletics, recreation, or intramurals?
This is a great list, Emily. And I would also say we have fabulous gym spaces on campus. We have workout spaces on campus, and it's there if you want it. And it's also, some students choose not to engage in this and are super involved in things like the arts and orchestra and music. And so there's something for everyone is what I would say. And, this time of year for some students, it's just terrific to get out into the changing colors and be outside. And just a walk around the quad can be a great way to get some recreation and quiet on our campus.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I think students also participate in the McKean Center. I'm using that as a nice little transition point there to talking about the McKean Center for the common good. So I mentioned our first president, McKean, at the beginning with one of those early slides and his quote about the common good and one of Bowdoin's purposes in the world. And I think we take that really seriously. I think our students are often drawn to Bowdoin in part because of their concern about others and their desire to have an impact. And there are a lot of different ways that students engage in that work here, and then once they've graduated as alumni. So the McKean Center does everything from sponsor alternative spring break opportunities to serve as a clearinghouse and home for many of the student civic engagement and volunteer opportunities like the Bowdoin Volunteer Corps, to offering up resources like grants and funding for special research or summer experiences that a student might take advantage of. Anything in particular that you really appreciate about the McKean Center, Melissa, or anything else you would add?
I direct a lot of students to the McKean Center. They're looking for a place to get engaged and meet other students. And the McKean Center is literally in the middle of our campus, and they do so many different programs and opportunities. There's an inroad for basically anybody who wants to get involved in programming. So I recommend really for every student to do something through the McKean Center. It's also one of our offices that offers some of the orientation trips, which is wonderful.
Great. I'm excited to share with you this picture of what's called Ladd House, which is also street address 30 College Street. And also the new home as of this year of many of our offices that really provide space and serve students outside the classroom in different ways, including our Center for Multicultural Life. The Center for Multicultural Life in that newly renovated Ladd House building has lots of great space that many of our student groups, affinity organizations, identity-based, cultural-based organizations make use of, but they also do so much more. They're not just space. They have fantastic staff. They engage community in conversations about difference, and conflict and perspective and identity. They offer leadership and community building opportunities, and of course, events and programs. So definitely want to give a shout out to the Center for Multicultural Life. Melissa, have you been in their new space yet? It is beautiful.
This is an amazing renovation that happened over the past few months, and several offices that support the student experience have moved under one roof, which is, I think Bowdoin is always thinking, how do we best support our students, and what offices co-collaborate to kind of create an experience for students, and how do we facilitate connectivity so that students aren't moving. We're a campus of many, many buildings. And so, it can be we're trying to make sure that students can activate their experience under one roof instead of moving all over campus sometimes. And so the space that they've created is beautiful. It's got a huge open downstairs living area for students to hang out in, to do programming in. There's a beautiful new kitchen. There's lots of offices on the second and the third floor, but there's also several kind of private spaces where students can tuck in, do homework. There's a prayer room. There is a meditation space for students. There are small conference areas. So really thoughtful design in thinking. The college really thought about how are students going to use the space, and how can we best serve the student experience through creating beautiful rooms for students to use.
Yeah, and I changed slides here to the Rachel Lord Center for Spiritual and Religious Life, thinking about those kosher kitchen and halal kitchen space, as well as the places for reflection and meditation and prayer, among other places. And did just want to make note of the ways that the college supports students' religious or spiritual growth, whether that's connecting a student to a local congregation of their faith tradition, helping student groups that are affiliated with the Rachel Lord Center put on events and religious holiday celebrations and programs, or serving just as a resource for students, whether they do or do not have a religious affiliation. All are welcome. It is a non-religious specific space for everyone to think about their spiritual growth and development as applicable to a particular student. All right, I do want to also be sure to mention the Bowdoin Outing Club, And the first point, which I think is so important, the Bowdoin Outing Club is for everyone. Some students make great use of the Outing Club during their time at Bowdoin. Others are not a participant in the opportunities they offer, which is totally fine as well. It is up to each student to decide how they want to make use, if they do, of the Outing Club. But I did want to note that in addition to sponsoring orientation trips, the Outing Club serves as a resource for students during their 4 years. It might be a really fun excursion or workshop or trip. Learn to surf, for example. It's a popular one I hear from students, or the gear room that students make use of. But I did want to just mention the Outing Club, particularly because I think, again, it's a reflection of the places that build community on campus and the ways that all are welcome. One of the things I love about the Outing Club is that there's something for everyone, no matter what your skill level may be, if you wish to participate, or even what gear you may own. It is that ethos of being inclusive and a place where students are sort of not afraid to try something new, that curiosity. Anything you mentioned, Melissa, about the Outing Club? It's good to know.
I love the picture you chose, Emily, because I think one of the things the Outing Club does really frequently is just host campfires right on campus for students. And they often create a theme for the campfire and collaborate with another office, for example, religious and spiritual life or swag. So they can draw students together around a warm campfire and just have hangout time right on campus. And so this is a perfect example of community gathering. You don't have to hike Mount Katahdin to be part of the Outing Club. You can come to the Outing Club campfire and roast a marshmallow and hang out with students and just have a lovely evening together.
And I think sort of pivoting just a little bit, and then we'll be sure to get to your questions, because I know we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to be sure we get to some of those great questions that are coming in. I think one of the themes that's come up a few times is certainly about our envisioning and support of students as they grow and develop and identify the things that are important to themselves in this process. And the way I will just give incredible kudos to all of my colleagues across campus who are there and here at Bowdoin thinking about connecting with students, and that connection as a community I think is really getting at the heart of what Bowdoin means and what's important to us. Speaking of connection and being responsive, one of the things we instituted a few years ago is our digital excellence commitment, and being responsive to the fact that not every student comes to Bowdoin with the same tech equipment. We wanted to ensure that no matter where a student's coming from or what they might have in that backpack or not, they are able to really thrive and be successful in the classroom. So every student at Bowdoin receives a MacBook computer, an iPad, an Apple Pencil software. And I think students always get excited about this part. They can decorate it, customize it, do what they wish, because it is theirs to keep when they graduate. Certainly, this is about access to the latest technology to be successful in the classroom, but I also think it gets at the notion of being a community where we really try to be responsive to students' needs, and think about all the different ways that people engage in community when they're on campus. I also just had to put in a few fun pictures because I think the Bowdoin experience, we've talked about a lot of resources and opportunities, is also a joyful one. Our students really love being at Bowdoin. And it's a place that I think they grow and learn and develop, certainly, but also they enjoy themselves while they're here and while they're doing that. And I think that is so important. I'll leave you just with a quick snapshot before we turn to Q&A, of a poem. It's adapted from a poem by one of our previous presidents. We call it The Offer of the College. And I think it really speaks to the kinds of opportunities and experiences that we hope students have at Bowdoin. And there's so many different lines here that I think get at the kinds of experiences our students enjoy. We actually will ask your student when they apply to Bowdoin to select one of these lines. There's no one right or wrong answer. Any of these lines, I think, can reflect the opportunities that you'll find on our campus, a place where we care very deeply about community, where we are engaged in thinking about how we interact with one another, kindness and gratitude, where there's incredibly rigorous and challenging intellectual inquiry and academic experience, but also a whole range of people and resources and supports on campus that are there and available for students as well. All right, I'm going to turn off my PowerPoint and turn to your fantastic questions, and make sure that in our last 10 minutes or so, we can try to address as many as we possibly can. I know we're not going to get to all of your wonderful questions. So if we don't get to your question, please know that you can always reach out to the admissions office or any of the other offices that I've mentioned today, or that Melissa's mentioned today, and raise your question, and we'd be happy to help. All right. I see there's some questions. Melissa, I'm curious. So sometimes students and families, especially those coming from outside of snowy, cold places, wonder what it's like to be in a Maine winter. I'm curious if you've talked to students coming from other temperatures, other climates. What's your advice? What's your takeaway? What would you add to that conversation about a Maine winter? Is it dark? Is it cold? What do students do?
I'm going to give you the honest answer. Yeah, we are up in the north and we are very far east. And so I think it's really helpful for students to have an awareness that we do have short daylight in the wintertime. We have long nights, and that nothing can prepare you for that if you haven't experienced it yet. And we're going to get you through it the first year if it's really unusual. I have lots of conversations the first year with students from San Diego or Texas or Arizona who are like, what is happening here? It's so dark here. We turn on the warmth in our campus when the winter comes. We've been talking about all these great spaces. We have wonderful, cozy spaces for students. Our dining halls are warm spaces. The food fuels us for the winter. So I would say, don't be daunted. We are going to take good care of you if you have not experienced winter before. And there is so much joy in the night sky in Maine. We get so much beautiful night sky. We get snow. We have beautiful changes of season, the leaves, and then the emergence of spring. There's just such a joyful moment in the spring, the first warm day when students can be out on campus feeling like they can take off the coats and kind of be a little bit more like free in terms of the weight of the clothing they've been wearing. So, and then we do have a program on our campus, I'll just make note of this, where for aided students from certain locations, we do have a program where we can provide coats, boots, and scarves, hats, and mittens. or gloves. And so just know a student who might come in on a certain level of aid could be a participant in that program where they would receive some outdoor gear.
I love how in the spring it'll be in the 40s and everyone's in shorts and t-shirts on the quad sunbathing because it is back to the sun is out, the sun is out. So another question that I've seen come up a little bit is about student health, so health insurance, you know, if a student is receiving treatment for a health condition currently at home in high school, how does that potentially work with coming to college? Well, I mean, in this case, Bowdoin specific, but probably a more universal question in general. So
I'm going to give a really broad answer because I'm not the expert, but what I can share to you is there's a lot of information as students on board to Bowdoin about how to transition their health and their clinical mental health. So we have an insurance program. Students can opt into that or not opt into that. Our students do need to have insurance. There's lots of information about what our insurance is, what's covered. Many of our students elect the Bowdoin insurance plan. Many students do not. For some students who may be seeing a mental health provider at home, for some of those students, that provider can practice telehealth into Maine. For other students, that's not a possibility. I think one of the things that came out of COVID was this amazing opening of telehealth possibilities. So our counseling service will work with students to determine if they want mental health support, whether it's going to happen at Bowdoin, whether they're going to use our telehealth support. We have a really wonderful telehealth program at Bowdoin. We have amazing clinical people in our health and counseling team who just work closely with students to make sure that they're getting the support that they need. So rest assured, we have an amazing team, and then we have a walk-in clinic just off campus. There is a walk-in clinic, and then we're very close to Midcoast Hospital. So I think it's helpful for families to know that there is healthcare very close to our campus.
some great questions in about transportation. So getting to and from campus from Boston or Portland or other locations, getting around downtown Brunswick. Can you have a car on campus? Melissa, I'm curious if you could talk a little bit, especially, students and families who might be wondering, okay, I live on the other side of the country or the world. How do I even get to campus? But then when I'm there, what do I need to know? What would you share with prospective families?
Great travel options to get to Brunswick, Maine. We have an Amtrak right downtown. We have a Concord Trailways bus, both go straight to Boston. We have a local bus called the Breeze that takes students down to Portland. It's really lovely. Our students use Portland a lot since that bus went into service. It's very easy to get down to Portland, which is about 30 minutes from campus, 30 miles or so. Boston is another big hub. A lot of our students elect to fly into Boston and then take the public transportation up to campus. Our students talk to each other. They share rides. They're always helping each other out, get places. We do not permit first-year students to have vehicles on campus. There are very few exceptions to that policy at Bowdoin. And if a student is requesting an exception, that student would be speaking with me. Yeah, I think transportation is actually really great and straightforward, and students travel together, and bus, train, we've got it all.
And the easiest way to get to downtown Brunswick is probably walking, biking, or any sort of other personal pedestrian travel. It's easier and closer than even if you did have a vehicle to get you there as well. Some questions coming in about student experience and the social scene. How would you describe the social scene in addition to student clubs and organizations that students participate in? Is Bowdoin a place where sort of everyone can find their people? How would you, in talking to first-year students, describe the transition to finding the Bowdoin community?
We engineer this for our incoming new students in a really thoughtful way. So the first is how we assign roommates. We have an incredibly thoughtful roommate process where students fill out a lengthy form with all kinds of questions. And we are very clear that we want our students to be honest about who they are so that we can create successful roommate matches. Our students live in quads, they live in doubles. You're going to have a roommate at Bowdoin your first year on our campus. And so the roommate, we think about our rooms, and then we think about our floors. So, and then we think about the building. So the team in residential life really thinks comprehensively about every community that they're creating inside the 8 bricks that we have for our first year students. Once students arrive to campus, the second opportunity to create sort of a pod of students is through your orientation trip experience. So you will suddenly then be introduced to 10 students who aren't going to be living with you, but who you will be traveling with for a few days on the orientation trip or spending time with. So that's another group of friendly faces to have meals with the first few weeks on campus as you're learning your way around. Another place where students really get to know other students is in our first year writing seminar, which is a very small course, 16 students in each first year writing seminar with a faculty member. This is our introduction to writing, critical thinking, reading in the first year experience. So along the way in the first few weeks, there are lots of these opportunities where students are in small groups that we're creating so that they're meeting more and more people. And then those people are introducing them to other people, and it kind of goes from there.
All right. One more question, and then I'm going to get to our last question here. It is probably a bit of a cliche term these days in the college admissions world, but the vibe, competitive versus collaborative, that is verbatim the question that came in. I would say definitively collaborative, ambitiously, kindly collaborative. But Melissa, what would you add from, your close work with students every day?
100% collaborative. We're a rigorous institution. Our students work hard, and the academics are challenging, and our students help each other. They don't climb over each other. And so I think it's really important to say that our students care a lot about each other's experiences at Bowdoin, and that's something we all share as a community. And so we are a collaborative place, and we really welcome that and celebrate that.
All right, I said this was going to be a last question. I'm going to turn to our last question really quickly. I do want to just rapid fire get some answers out to folks. If you're interested in musical groups and troops and opportunities on campus, there's lots of great resources on the web. You can find out all about them, and no, your student does not necessarily have to be a major in music to participate. There was a question about accessing information and resources about LGBTQ life on campus. Great question. Lots of also resources on the web. Don't hesitate to reach out to SWAG. We have staff who would love to answer your questions, connect you or your student with students on campus, and talk more about how we support students, no matter their gender identity or sexual orientation. We welcome all. Definitely, I know lots of great questions coming in about the arts. I'm so sorry we don't have time to get to them. I will turn to one of the questions that was really speaking to me that I saw came in quite a while ago, Melissa, and that was for a parent who feels a bit nervous. Maybe they themselves are unfamiliar with the college experience, but they're sending off their young person, their first, maybe only child, to college. What advice would you give that family? Any words of wisdom as we end our session this evening?
It's such a great question. So first of all, I want to say we see you. This is a big deal. Sending a student to college is a big deal. And that's why you're on this call right now, to learn us, to learn who we are, to get a sense of who we are as a campus, our personality, what we offer, what we do for support. And we're scratching the surface on this call. I just want to say Emily's covered a lot, but there's a lot to all the lot that she talked about. So for new parents, I say, trust your student is starting off on this incredible journey, and they're coming to a place that has these resources. And I think giving your student space to learn and fail is a critical part of the college experience. And I would just say that we love working with our students at Bowdoin. Every person at Bowdoin is there because they think of themselves as an educator, and we take our jobs really seriously.
What a nice sentiment. And I would echo that, we would all be honored to be part of your student's experience, but whether or not that comes to be, or your student ends up applying to Bowdoin or wherever they may be in their college admissions journey, just a shout out and a word of gratitude and appreciation to you, the listener. As Melissa mentioned, you are here, and whether you're or not your student has said it to you, thank you for being curious and invested in this process for them. And know that all of us at Bowdoin are eager and happy to serve as a resource for you and your family in the months, weeks, years ahead. whatever they may be, you can always reach out to the admissions office. We are absolutely happy to help. I know there's so many other fantastic questions that unfortunately we weren't able to get to, but know that you can reach out and we'd love to be a resource for you. Thank you for joining us. I hope whether it's in the evening or great morning or whatever it might be, you have a great rest of your week, and best wishes to you.
Thank you so much.